Hi guys, it's Oli here from Rad Season. I'm excited to be joined today by adventurer, tuk-tuk enthusiast, and co-founder of Large Minority, Julian Carnall. Julian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ollie. Yeah, pleasure being on.
And whereabouts are you at the moment, Julian?
I'm currently in, I guess, a slightly opening up London for all my sins. My wife works here, and one of the main reasons I am here. So yeah, I'm in London.
And what's the situation like? How's it been?
It's just, well, the last couple of weeks, things have started to open up again. Businesses are opening. Have opened already. Pubs are doing some sort of, well, they're doing social distancing, but they're open. And yeah, slowly getting back to normal, but just the new normal, obviously masks and yeah, that's where we are right now.
It's strange how I'm from London originally. I grew up in Wimbledon.
I live very close to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I was there just before this all happened, and then got back. But it's a strange, definitely a strange time. And whereabouts did you grow up? Did you grow up in London or?
No, not at all. I was born in Kenya and lived in East Africa for until I was about 20. Kenya, Tanzania, a very small village outside of Nairobi called Tigoni, which not many people would have heard of, and then moved a little bit further outside to a place called Naivasha, which is a lake. My father was working on a flower farm at the time, so yeah, lived in East Africa, grew up there, and actually absolutely loved it.
Wow! And then did you like where did the interest from travel begin? Was that from a young age over in Africa, or was it sort of when you came over to the UK?
No, I've only been in the UK for 6 years now, so I would say definitely, yeah, from a very young age. I mean, just naturally, because we lived in quite remote-ish areas. Travel was always part of growing up, so it was travel a long way to school, and yeah, I think I got the travel bug very early on. My uncle was a pilot, and yeah, we just traveling long distances by road from the age of, well, as young as I can remember. I think that's where it started, and then yeah, here we are, tuk-tuk rallying.
So I mean, I'd love to talk about I guess where did that all begin, and what was the what was the first trip? Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's one of those weird ones where I just have somehow fallen into some sort of tuk-tuk obsessed person. But I mean, anybody who's ever driven one or been in one will kind of have some sort of appreciation for what I'm talking about. The idea of the trips that we run came about, I think it was 2006 or 2007 in Sri Lanka itself. I was just there on holiday, really, and persuaded a local chap to lend me his tuk-tuk, and then I took it from him for a couple of days, and had the best few days of my life to date. And yeah, I mean, the vehicle itself, I don't know if you've ever been in one, but like, it's slow enough. I mean, I drive bikes as well, but it's way slower than a motorbike, but with open sides, you're slightly more protected. And it gives you an insight into the local area, just like nothing else I've been in. Cars, you're a little bit more protected and maybe a little bit more cut off. Motorbikes, for me, it's all about like the driving, the speed, but then tuk-tuks just has that wonderful like balance between the two. So that's where it started, in the back of borrowing someone's crappy little tuk-tuk in the middle of Sri Lanka in 2006, I think.
And what sort of speeds do they go? I mean, I've been in them in Sri Lanka and Thailand, but it sort of seems like I've never driven one. It's like, I've always wanted to. It seems quite sketchy.
They're not that fast, but I mean, there's a few variations. Certainly, the ones in Bangkok, the ones in Thailand can get up to a serious speed. They've got some big engines in some of those, like 650, I think. And with some crazy drivers behind the wheel, that they can really get up to some speed. But in general, the ones that we use they're like standard issue, like Indian made Bajaj. So they're like, they used to be 2-stroke. Now most of them are 4-stroke. And they're top, you're looking top speed down a hill at like 70 kilometers an hour max.
Okay.
But that is, that's flying, and you feel like you're probably going about 150 at that speed. I've actually got one here in London, and I took a wrong turn like last week, ended up on the M25 with the tuk-tuk, which is legal, but you're getting kind of passed by these massive trucks that blow you, across the road. And yeah, it was well, it was fun.
And like when you did that when you went over there the first time and sort of like organized it, I mean, how many were there of you? Was it just was it a small group or?
No, well, actually, that was, funnily enough, one of the biggest groups to date. It started off launching. So Juan, my co-founder, had done a recce since I had been on that trip with him, and he then did a recce in 2007 or 2008. And then once we were set on the idea, we kind of put it out to just our network of friends, and ended up getting something like 35 teams on it. So 70 people, and this was just after Sri Lanka had come out of a very, I think a 30-year civil war, and we had, this is looking back at it now, we had placed it as a race, which nowadays with like health and safety, and even then in those days, it was in hindsight a ridiculously stupid idea, but it was crazy fun. So it started as a race, if you can imagine, like 30 tuk-tuks lining up, our first event, like flagging them off, not even thinking really too much about what we're doing, and they would literally crashing into each other as they drove out the gate. And yeah, needless to say, it's no longer a race. But yeah, we called
was that the only one that was a race, the first one, and then you thought,
I think
you change it, or?
The second one in 2010 was a variation of, so we obviously cut down the time. We tried to take all of the timed element out, just because it was stupidly dangerous, and we started then implementing what we now have as the challenges, and I can explain a little bit about those, but just to add a competitive nature, because naturally everybody is super competitive and they like to compete against each other, but you can't do it. We couldn't do it. We couldn't do it as a race. So that's how the challenges were born as well.
Okay. And then what do the challenges consist of then?
So it's an element that I think, my perspective is, on face value, it's not for everybody, but it's an element we added in just because of the competitiveness. And so we just add in, it's normally a combination of like cultural based, culinary based, some physical challenges, and a combination of those, sometimes language based. And it's just to like accrue points by doing challenges. I don't know if you've ever seen something like The Amazing Race, or I think there was a recent program that was aired in TV here, Race Across the World, where they used a similar format where they give teams challenges to do, activities to do, which they get points, and then they get measured against the other teams. So we implement that on most of our challenges. And it's one of those things where people on the first couple of days, or even the first leading up until the event, they'll be like, nah, that's not really for me. And then as soon as you start the first briefing saying, right, there's going to be some challenges, everybody just dives straight in and becomes the most super competitive human being.
That's cool. And how does it work? Is it sort of done? Is it a team? Do you go with, like one person's driving and one person's in the back of the tuk-tuk, or there's a group of you?
Yeah. So
how does that work?
In the tuk-tuk challenges, all of them are done by teams. So for the most part, people sign up as a team. So they're usually like friends or a couple, or a group of mates that then segregate into different teams. The teams of 2 or 3, just because of the capacity of the tuk-tuk. So they'll enter as their team. Obviously, it starts with like a team name, and then they'll stick together for the whole challenge, and then that's obviously when they compete against the other teams on the challenge.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Cool. And after, so after you did Sri Lanka, like where did you go? Like from there, were you like, okay, we'll try and look at different locations? And
yeah, we immediately went in 2010. I think it was. We launched a Cambodia version of the tuk-tuks, but back then the original Cambodian tuk-tuk is kind of like an offshoot of what the back when I think the French were in Cambodia, they had these cyclo rickshaws,
mm-hmm.
and they then like evolved into these things called like auto remorque, which was, if you said tuk-tuk in Cambodia, that's what it was. It was basically a carriage, which was 500 kilos, just a carriage, and then a really crappy like low cc scooter that was pulling this carriage. So we did it on those, and that was just madness. I mean, that in itself, most of the adventure was just driving that vehicle, because it was, it wasn't made for long distances. It's mechanically, like, it doesn't make sense. The rules of physics, it was normally about 110 or 120 cc little scooter with a 500 kilo trailer with no extra brakes as well. So your braking was for the scooter, but it was supposed to brake that. So that was Cambodia. We've since changed it to the traditional, like, I don't know if you've probably seen from all your travels, but nowadays the traditional Indian tuk-tuk has made its way pretty much across the world, certainly in like a lot of developing countries, like, just because of its functionality. It can go in lots of terrain. It's handy to travel with, to get people in the back, and we've now gone back to that version in Cambodia.
Okay,
thankfully.
Yeah, cool. And what would you say that, doing that first Cambodia trip, was that like more sketchy than when you first did the Sri Lanka one, or is it?
Different? I would have said I would say so, and I think if you ask Juan, who's the co-founder, he would agree definitely. Obviously, I've mentioned the race stuff, which was separate to Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
From Cambodia, from day one, from the moment that you got on, people, you were never really comfortable. So every day, 150 kilometers on it, and that was also the time when Cambodia, in 2010, they were rebuilding a lot of their main highway networks. So around Cambodia, there's I think 6 main highways that kind of access the whole country, and they were rebuilding a lot of that. So the traffic on those roads, it was just diversion after diversion after diversion, and you're navigating massive trucks with this tiny little tuk-tuk that shouldn't be on the road, that can't brake. And it was great adventure for everybody. And I'm sure, I still, I meet the teams that did those first 31s, and those are their main memories of it. Was just, thank God we made it through. And yeah.
And looking back at those early days when you're doing it, and I mean, were there any sort of standout moments when you thought, okay, this is definitely the most challenging, or if there's something like some scary moments maybe?
Yeah, I mean, overall, this question I get quite a lot, and it's one of those where I'm sometimes not the best person to answer that, because I find I get sheltered from a lot of the information that the teams actually have on the road, because they don't want to give it to me. I mean, I certainly have a lot of there's a few standouts. Cambodia, like I said, the driving in itself, I mean, I could talk all day about that, about how sketchy that really was. There was a couple of pretty funny moments. I mean, the one in Sri Lanka that stands out most was probably one of my busiest days ever. We had, we've had a few accidents in our time, thankfully, touch wood, nothing major, but there's been a few accidents. And this particular day, there was a pretty major accident. A team in Sri Lanka was speeding around a corner, drove off a cliff, a steep ravine. Somehow they managed to get out of the rickshaw. And it was a pretty major accident, but no one else involved, and they had a few cuts and bruises, but nothing thankfully too major. And on the same day, it was a particular area that we drive through quite a lot on one of our routes, where there's some wild elephants that kind of hang around, because they've got used to like the main local buses that drive back and forth on that road. They chuck out fruit, and so the elephants kind of are used to hanging around there. And I particularly said to some of the teams, like, just watch out, if there are elephants, just take it easy. And don't stop, don't do anything. Of course, one of the teams stopped. This is what
you want to take a photo, don't you? You got to.
Yeah, of course you do. And this particular team stopped, and I think he was doing something along the lines of what you're not supposed to do, obviously, feed a wild animal. And it came up. This video has since been all over the internet. And there's this wild elephant that kind of walks straight up to the tuk-tuk, takes kind of roughly the food out of this person's hand, and then proceeds to knock over the tuk-tuk and like knock it on its side. This was the same time that I was dealing with this accident, this huge, big accident. So lots of, police and stuff involved. And I got a call from somebody saying, hey, one of the teams has just been knocked over by an elephant. And I was like, come on, man, you're joking. This is impossible. It's never happened. It's been doing it for ages. It's just not possible. And then sure enough, someone sent me the link within 10 minutes, nowadays, and with Facebook and everything, the link was up, and yeah, there it was. The guy got knocked over by the elephant, and thankfully he was fine. But yeah, that was funny. Stand out in my mind always.
That's crazy. And I mean, like planning these trips, logistically, what goes into it? I mean, how much time are you spending before the trip takes place, getting everything ready?
Nowadays, it's because we've done, certainly the ones that we run quite often. We've got some of the main planning like sorted, so it doesn't take too much. But we're constantly like, changing some of the routes. We don't have fixed routes, so obviously people can go where they like. But because we go from point A to point B every day, there's only a certain amount of variations they can go. So we're constantly changing places where people stay, and just making it an all around like better experience based on feedback and stuff. So that takes time. And then the new trips, like setting up a new trip is always something that takes naturally longer. Finding the tuk-tuks, finding the best places to stay, the routes, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then and then you guys did adventure challenges over in India as well, right? After Cambodia. Yeah,
so we did after Cambodia we do one in India, in Kerala, so in like southwest. It's like a big loop around Kerala, what beautiful part of India. Similar, very similar format. We've just launched one in Italy.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, we're hoping to launch a couple of other destinations with tuk-tuks in the not too distant future, but let's see what happens with COVID.
Yeah, with everything, huh?
Yeah.
And when was the Italian one launched?
So the Italian one was was as a direct result of COVID kind of starting in March, April, when we kind of realized quite quickly that there was a more and more realistic chance that our trips planned for this year weren't going to happen to our existing destinations, even though actually I think India, aside Sri Lanka, is they're one of the best. I think they've handled the whole thing one of the best in the world. Really, they've got a very low number. But getting to these places I just don't think it's going to be realistic in the next few months. So Italy came about of that. So it was searching for destinations that that had tuk-tuks, and then we came across. I mean, obviously I've seen them for years, but there's a variation made by Piaggio, which is another brand, and they've got this really typically Italian, way more sexier, way more slicker Italian tuk-tuk, which is convertible and just a little bit more stylish. So we thought we'd give that a go, and we did the first one in literally last 10 days ago, which went really well. Obviously a lot of COVID related restrictions, which were fine, but you know, naturally driving a tuk-tuk, you're actually away from everybody anyway, you know, so once you get in the tuk-tuk, you're on your own, as long as you practice your, you know, the government rules or whatever they are in the destination. It's perfect for it because you're on your own and you can stop and wherever you like, and it works well.
And where did it go? Was there a sort of like set? Is it kind of like point A to B?
Yeah, it was
where you guys start, and
it was point A to B. It was a good mixture of like local, like smaller, really smaller, independent, like not farm stays, but we stayed in like a vineyard. We stayed in. We basically, you fly into Milan and then we drive up through like Monza up towards the lakes, the northern lakes like Lake Como and Lake Maggiore, and stop each night along the way. So you're doing about 100, 120, 150 kilometers a day, and then everybody meets up in the evening. And yeah, what was really interesting about the Italian one actually is I just assumed for some reason that people would be more used to the tuk-tuk, to the ape that they're called there, but actually it was, you almost got more of a reaction than we did as foreigners driving in Sri Lanka or India or Cambodia, because even the Italians were like, well, that's really cool because you've got your convertible like tuk-tuk, but also there's not very many of the vehicles, so they almost, you know, they give you, you know, they're very welcoming because they're just excited to see you in a different kind of vehicle because there's none of them around. And then also, you know, we were going up big mountain passes and where they shouldn't really be going, they really struggle up the hills, which makes it, you know, the locals are just, you know, really encouraging, and yeah, it's fun.
That's cool. And were they all like beeping you and, you know, when you're driving past them and that sort of stuff?
Constantly stopping, asking to take pictures, like, can I get in? Yeah, which is, you naturally get a lot of that everywhere you go in a tuk-tuk, mainly in India, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, because it's just not normal to see foreigners driving tuk-tuks, whereas in Italy, obviously, you know, you're European there. But it's just a vehicle, but they just loved it. Yeah, they absolutely loved it. I think it's, you know, if you're in a funny old like Fiat 500 or something like that, just a really quirky vehicle, you'll always get that reaction. And yeah, we certainly got that, which also allows you, naturally, you're on the front foot with the locals because you're suddenly welcomed, you know, for that extra like behind the scenes visit of, you know, grandma's house, or you're just welcomed. A little bit more warmly, I find, like when you're in them. And I think anybody that drives a tuk-tuk can't really take themselves too seriously, so that helps as well. Yeah,
nice. And like now that you've done that, I mean, if you looked at other locations, perhaps in Europe, where you think, okay, we can potentially do it over there, or was it the fact that Italy, you know, was already kitted out with tuk-tuks? And
the tuk-tuk theme with Italy fitted in as like an initial match, just because that design, and there's a history with that, with tuk-tuks in particular, like the small three-wheelers. I think they were initially made like back in the 50s maybe, where to get through really all the narrow streets, the cobbled streets up in like the small villages, because they could access the towns and stuff. So that was a great little match for Italy, as certainly as like historical, like, you know, not that we're just coming with a foreign vehicle and driving there. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. I'm biased probably with tuk-tuks, so I'll be like, yep, I'm happy to drive all over Europe, all over the world in them. But we are looking, yeah, I mean, to do cross-European trips. I know there's quite a few in Portugal where you are. You've probably got quite a few of those. If you're in Lisbon, I certainly.
I'm just outside Lisbon, yeah. So there's a few in the city, and yeah, I kind of like jump on with. I'm with my son. I've got a 3-year-old. He loves it. So
Yeah.
whenever we go anywhere, he just points to the tuk-tuk and just wants to get on there. And
Well, so that's actually a common theme with the one I have here. Like I said, I have the Indian version here, and the kids are just like obsessed with it. Obviously, in London, we've got a big population of Asians from like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, where it's they're at home with the rickshaws, so they absolutely love it. Like I get stopped constantly every single day if I'm on the rickshaw. Like, can I take a photo? And they just it's really good fun. And kids, yeah, they. I think that I was saying this to my wife. I think one of the reasons the kids love it so much is certainly in Europe, is because they've never seen the tuk-tuks before ever.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously adults who've travelled most adults here travelled and they've seen them, but the kids are just they're mind blown. It's really fun.
He's sort of fascinated with the lights, or if it's got some like sound system. So I remember we were in like some of these islands in Thailand or in Bangkok, and he just sees like these big like speakers and stuff like that, and
yeah, I bet.
And so besides from the tuk-tuk adventure challenges, you guys also you did a sailing one as well in the Philippines, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The sailing one we've only run twice. It's logistically it's a tough one. Being on the sea like naturally is just that extra bit more challenging, a little bit more dangerous. You're at the mercy of Mother Nature a lot more than anywhere else. But it is one of my favorite trips. The guys, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to Philippines, but it's such an amazing destination. I mean, I love growing up in Kenya. I spent a lot of time on the coast there. The Kenyan coast is amazing, but I mean, the islands around the Philippines are just, they're just amazing. And we took they're called pirogues. So it's a trimaran. They're really, really quick. And you don't sail them yourselves on that. If you are a sailor, you can sail. I've sailed a little bit, so you can sail, but you're always kind of at the supervision of the local crew who are they're like sea dogs, like been on a boat since they were 2, and they know everything about these boats. A lot of them are handmade, and yeah. So the Philippines one, we go. It's like a 7-day trip. You're only doing about 3 to 4 hours sailing every day.
Okay.
But when the weather's right, I mean, it's just amazing. Island to island hopping, and then we do those challenges. That is one where we actually can revert back to the speed, because obviously there's no danger in the speed really. But we also then go back to the challenges when we get on the island. So set a few challenges of like going around the islands doing stuff.
That's cool. And I recently saw the challenge, the adventure challenge that you guys do in Amazon as well.
Yeah,
which just looks wild. I mean, kayaking and sort of hiking through there, and staying with local villages and stuff. Just looks amazing.
That's also. I mean, for me, the Amazon is an amazing bucket list place to visit. It's quite an intense place to go to, in my opinion. I mean, like even growing up, spending a lot of time in the bush in Africa, and then I guess some of the jungles in Asia, nothing can compare. I haven't been to like the Central African Republic or that area, or Congo, where obviously there's a huge amount of rainforest in Africa, but from where I've seen, nothing compares to what the Amazon is like, as far as just everything. I mean, every corner, every bug, every tree, it's wild, and you really do feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. And we go to a place in Colombia called Leticia, which is not normally on very many people's radars. Like they don't, for some reason, don't really associate Colombia with having a large part of the Amazon. Normally it's Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil, obviously. But Colombia has a huge part of the Amazon, and Leticia is right on the border between Peru and Brazil. You can only get there by plane or obviously boat down the Amazon. So we start there, and from start to finish, it's just wild. I mean, out of your comfort zone, mosquitoes bigger than your house. They bite through things that you think, I'm safe here, but the mosquitoes just chew straight through. Fish that you think you've seen most fish in the world, and then suddenly this dinosaur comes out of the lake, and you're like, what, so amazing. And we're actually looking at changing the format a bit on that one. I mean, traditionally we've done the challenge where we do challenges again on that. So it's like a combination of, we called it and themed it like Indigenous Olympics. So obviously taking some of the traditional sports from the sports and hunting techniques from a lot of the tribes in that area, to use those as techniques, as methods to have a competition through. Which work really well, but things like blow dart, like bow and arrow, just generally like throwing, tools, and then like in the traditional kayaks, like dugout canoes and things like that, fishing, a little bit of hunting, stuff like that. I guess a small element of survival stuff. We do a night where you kind of camp in the middle of the jungle, where you build your own camp for the night. You've obviously got a good support of like local guides, so you're not on your own, but you do feel like you're in the middle of the nowhere. There's no, obviously, torch goes out and you're just surrounded by the noise of the jungle, which is just something out of this world, really.
And are the guys, are they getting any training when they first arrive, or is there kind of like an initial?
Well, so how we do it, it's not really like
it's not like a survival.
It's not like a survival, but you've mentioned that. I've recently been talking with, a friend of mine now, I'd say, a guy called Tom, who's set up a company called Desert Island Survival, and he does some amazing, specifically desert island survival. So I think he's a bushcraft expert. I mean, I know he's a bushcraft expert, but he takes people out to some islands in Tonga, I think around Panama, Philippines, and we were actually going to do something together in the Amazon where we kind of mold our Amazon trip into actually a survival trip. So instead of the challenge that we do it right now, we'll do it as a survival trip. So they will go out, we'll take an expert from Tom, if not Tom himself, as the bushcraft expert, do a few days of survival training in the jungle, fire lighting, and then local honing your local skills, bushcraft skills, with like an expert like Tom, but then of course with the local guides who live in the jungle, and then basically that culminates in, after 3 days of training, in a 3 or 4 day survival where basically they're left in an area that's pretty much in the middle of nowhere, with a sat phone and some drinking water, to stay for 4 days, and then we pick them up in a few days. So that's a really exciting. I'm really excited about that, as something, as a variation, because the Amazon is it's a place that. So Juan, my business co-founder, he's from Colombia originally, and that was a project that he set up way back. It's just, I feel it. People are a little bit hesitant to go to the Amazon, but it's something that we obviously want to keep it small. But I think, I personally think it's a great bucket list place, and everyone should go, especially with what's going on in the world these days, and what you see in the media about. I mean, it's definitely shrinking. So yeah.
And now, like with everything that's going on with the pandemic, and what are you working on, and what sort of projects are you looking to do, either later on this year or next year?
So that's one of them. That's one of the trips that I'm working on at the moment. I think realistically, Colombia's been hit pretty hard, and I think they haven't even reached their peak really right now. So they're still struggling with that. So I think that will probably realistically be something for next year. As far as this year goes, Italy, we're hoping to run a couple more trips, but they really are going to be quite last minute. Obviously, summer is already kind of running away from us.
Yeah.
tuk-tuks in winter aren't exactly ideal, but but maybe there's something in that. Then we're going to launch a Pakistan trip in tuk-tuks for next year, which should be really cool. So going on the Karakoram Highway, up through some of the highest roads in the world in the Pakistan side, which I'm really excited about. How that will go down with everyone else is yet to be seen. But I'm definitely going to go ahead with it and see who comes.
That's exciting, man. Is there any advice that you would give to people that are looking to do something like this for the first time? I mean, going to these countries, if you've never been to any of them before, can be a bit daunting. But yeah, then sort of doing one of these challenges, what do you normally say to people?
Well, I mean, if it's tuk-tuk related, you mean, or just in general?
Yeah, tuk-tuk or just in general.
Yeah, I mean, tuk-tuk related, it's quite hard. The problem with being in it for so long is it's quite hard sometimes to really understand what like your perception is of it, or what your let's say hesitations would be. But I think that a lot of the hesitation can be, well, I don't want to drive the whole time, and is the driving quite difficult? Is it difficult? And the answer to those two questions, is it difficult? Not really at all. I mean, it does take some getting used to, just because of the awkwardness of it. You've got like the gears on the left hand side of your handlebar with a clutch, where if you've ever driven like a scooter, that's where the brake should normally be. And then the brakes in an awkward position. So it can be a little bit awkward, but it's very easy to get used to. I think that's a hesitation, and I always say, you get used to it and you'll be fine. And then also just the driving in the destinations. I think people are very, very wary of it, but because of the tuk-tuk being quite a slow vehicle, it's actually fairly safe. I mean, I think statistically, it's safer than it's certainly safer than cycling. Just because you're enclosed, and I think that's a bit of a misconception about the tuk-tuk driving itself. That it's don't get me wrong, like pretty much every day you have lots of close calls, but yeah. And then a general advice, I don't know where to go with that really. I could go in all sorts of angles.
Yeah. What's the best way of people getting in touch and to follow what you guys are doing?
For us, I mean, so if they're on social media, I like to say we've got a presence maybe outside of Twitter, but Facebook, Instagram, we're at large minority is us. You can find us on that, and then our website is largeminority.travel, but you can find us on .com as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Or search Tuk-Tuk Adventures, and hopefully we'll be up.
You guys will be there.
Yeah.
Nice one. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys are up to next year, and yeah, I'd love to come on one of these as well. It sounds pretty fun. So
please do. Yeah, come on one anytime.
Cool. All good. Thanks, Julian.
No problem. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for being on. Thanks for having me.